Take a look at the black on white crimes, 385,000 in 2023. The white on black crimes, just under 118,000. You see the comparative numerical difference.
When the North Carolina stabbing happened, it seemed like the Democrats were more concerned about whether or not people would make it about race than they were about the crime itself. And you actually had Van Jones coming out on CNN and calling out Charlie Kirk for saying what a lot of people were actually thinking. Only now, Charlie Kirk has been 100% vindicated in the things he actually said. So let's go ahead and recap this scenario and then get to Charlie Kirk's response. But before we begin, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on this video so we break through the algorithms. Here we go.
I want to play. This is Charlie Kirk, why he says this hasn't gotten a lot of attention.
A white Ukrainian refugee was murdered just because she was white. Everybody knows that, obviously. If a random white person simply walked up to and stabbed a nice, law-abiding black person for no reason, it would be an apocalyptically huge national story used to impose national sweeping political changes on the whole country. Instead, Megan Basham, no one seems to care when a white woman gets stabbed to the death.
Wow. He said white a lot.
They've been looking for opportunities to make this some sort of like reciprocal George Floyd situation. And that's the part that I think he's almost giving away the game. And it's sad to see a lot of people going along with it.
You know, let me just say a couple of things. One is, I mean, what happened to that young woman was horrible. And it's everybody's nightmare. If you're in any public space, a subway, whatever, that something bad is going to happen to you or somebody you care about. So it does strike a chord. We don't know why that man did what he did. And for Charlie Kirk to say, we know he did it because she's white, when there's no evidence of that, it's just pure race-mongering, hate-mongering, it's wrong. Then he says that if something like that had happened the other way, there would be sweeping changes imposed on society. Where is the George Floyd Policing Act? It didn't pass. Even when you had a white police officer murder a black man on live television, the whole world saw, there were no sweeping changes. In fact, not one law was passed at the federal level. So I think that's an important thing to point out. The other thing is, you mentioned the thing about cashless bail. I think this is a big challenge that we have. Would you have felt better if there had been cash bail and the mom had come and put down $1,000 to let him out? It's not about cashless bail or no cashless bail. It's about the fact that we don't know how to deal with people who are hurting in the way this man was hurting. Hurt people hurt people. What happened was horrible, but it becomes an opportunity for people to jump on bandwagons. And then for someone like Charlie Kirk, he should be ashamed of himself. No one mentioned the word race, white, black, or anything except him. What people mentioned is the horror of what happened to this young woman.
So a couple of points about what Van Jones said, right? How in society can we handle someone who was hurting like the perpetrator? Easy. Mental institutions. This guy had a violent criminal past. He also was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and therefore he should not have been walking around the streets of any city to terrorize the public. And then you also have brought up in the discussion that now white folks are trying to make this their George Floyd moment. And I say these two instances are not really comparable because George Floyd was a career criminal who was high on drugs, who was detained by police in a manner that they were actually trained to do. And as far as the sweeping reform that Van Jones actually denies happened, that would be the no cash bail, right? That would be the revolving door in prisons that emerged after George Floyd's death, all right? And I'm not going to call it murder because it wasn't. Okay, but then of course you have Charlie Kirk, who's making two big points. First, if the races were reversed in this instance, it would be huge outcry from the media and the public. But since they were radio silent on this for 2 full weeks before it actually broke on the internet, you can see why the media chose not to cover this at first because it doesn't fit their narrative. But then you have secondly, Charlie Kirk's coming out and saying this lady was attacked clearly because she was white. Now, I don't know if he had access to this video beforehand because it seems to have broken yesterday, but you never know. Charlie Kirk is well connected in some of these situations. But this is actually the eye-opening video right after the crime. So there's the perpetrator himself saying apparently that the only reason he attacked this lady is because she was white. Okay, and if you've seen the whole video, you have poor Irina, after being stabbed, crouching down in the seat in terror, and then no one on the train doing anything to help her. Not to stop bleeding, not to call 911, none of that happened. This girl was left to die alone on this public transport. So after being completely vindicated about this whole scenario, Charlie Kirk then appeared on Will Cain's show to discuss exactly what happened.
He called you a race-monger, said you're the only one that brought up race. What do you say to Van Jones?
Well, first of all, as you aptly noted, that in the video, it's pretty clear that the attacker said, quote, "that white girl." Secondly, Van Jones, he puts race in almost every situation where it doesn't exist. For example, with the death of George Floyd, Van Jones repeatedly said that it was a racist attack. You know who didn't say that? Keith Ellison, who is the Attorney General of Minnesota at the time, said that race did not play any role in the actions that happened with George Floyd's death. But even beyond that, and I think this is what's very important, is that we are living in a mental model and a framing post-2020. The 2020 model is that the worst thing that could possibly happen is racial attacks. Remember, even before that, Jussie Smollett or the FBI being mobilized for even the slightest whisper of a hate crime. But now, all of a sudden, when we make the left live up to their own standard of rules, there is complete silence by the entire American media. And then Van Jones goes on television and calls me a race hustler for even calling out the facts and the specifics around this case. Now, this is what's quite interesting, because why is it the media was so quiet on this? You got to wonder, Will, because if the roles were reversed, and I tweeted this out and I will stand by it, if a white attacker was minding his own business and a perfectly law-abiding black individual was minding her own business, and that white attacker took out a knife and was relentlessly hacking a law-abiding black girl, you and I both know, Will, this would be national headlines, and there'd be more than 0 headlines, as you pointed out on your show yesterday. And so Van Jones, he wants to keep on trying to find racial motives that don't exist, and he ignores them when they're in broad daylight in front of him on recorded video and a horrendous attack such as this. The media doesn't care about this, and we should start asking why.
What is the answer to that, Charlie? Why?
I mean, it doesn't fit a narrative. This is my most charitable reading. The narrative that they have pushed forward in the last 10 years is that there is a relentless assault against black people on behalf of white people. And the data does not show that. You brilliantly pointed this out on your program yesterday. In fact, it's the exact opposite. White individuals are actually more likely to be attacked, especially even per capita, by black individuals in this country. The narrative that they have tried to force feed this nation post-2020 is that we are a systemically racist country to our core. We started to say the word racist more. We started to redesign our corporations. We started to teach things in our classrooms that were from the 1619 Project. And all of this has now been met with an appropriate backlash where people said, we're actually not nearly as racist as you say we are. In fact, we're the least racist country ever to exist in the history of the world. And in fact, if you want to actually talk about race-focused activity, why is it that you then ignore all the race-focused activity of black on white crime? Will, I want to live in a race-neutral country. I don't like talking about race all the time. But when I see it and I see the left ignore it and we try to make them live up to their own standard of rules that they force-fed us during the chaos of 2020, it really goes to show the destruction that this can lead to the entire nation. And the final thing I'll say is this, Will, is that this is more than just a semantic argument. This is more than just whether or not it's a race thing or not. Bad policing practices, consent decrees, opening up the prisons. As you say, $3.3 million is an outgrowth of a media narrative lie. So it's not just an innocent media narrative lie. Real policies get put into place when you don't challenge this nonsense in the public square.
That's it.
So this is nothing new to any of us. We know the media has a big double standard when it comes to race crimes. Okay, something real like this is going to get ignored because it doesn't fit the race hustlers narratives, i.e. the Democrats and the left. But something that is fake, like Jussie Smollett, they're going to shout it from the rooftops because they're trying to push a fake narrative that this country is implicitly racist, which of course you and I know is 100% false. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and say hi to your mom for me. Do you like t-shirts? Of course you do. And now you can support the channel by buying an Angry Teacher t-shirt designed by me, Angry Teacher. So if you like America, if you like freedom, if you like liberty, then go ahead and click the link in the description where all designs, of course, are 100% mother approved. So enjoy yourself and find something you like today.